Good evening and welcome to the post-launch news conference for Space Shuttle Discovery's STS-133 mission to the National Space Station. Joining us here today to discuss Discovery's historic final liftoff is Associate Administrator for Space Operations Bill Gerstenmaier.
Good evening.
The Space Shuttle Integration Manager Mike Moses.
Good evening.
And Space Shuttle Launch Director Mike Leinbach.
Good evening.
We'll start with some opening remarks and then take your questions, Mr. Gerstenmaier.
Thanks, John. This is a pretty tremendous day in spaceflight for us. This morning, ATV successfully docked to Space Station, which was a great way to start the day. I received a bunch of pages and emails from my European partners telling me we had to go launch Discovery today as soon as the ATV docked. And that was kind of a strange occurrence for me. I don't usually get approval from them. And then they wished me best of luck with the shuttle launch later in the day. And for us to be sitting here today with both of those events occurring as successfully as they have done, it was just an amazing event. So I'd also like to thank the teams that got us here. There was a lot of work that we talked about getting their vehicles ready to go fly. The teams were very well prepared today as we went in the count, went through activities. Mike Moses and Mike Leinbach will talk to you more about those events, but they went extremely well. We saw a couple foam losses during ascent from the external tank. We saw one. They're all after the aerodynamic sensitive time, so they're not a concern to us. There's one that's pretty noticeable around 3 minutes and 51 seconds. You'll see it in the video. It's probably a piece of foam about maybe 8 by 10 inches that comes off, but that's well after the area of concern from an impact to the orbiter standpoint. That's also consistent when we see cryopumping and the foam loss, so it's a mechanism we understand. And I would say all these events that we've seen, and we saw 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, they're all within family and they're typical kind of performance from the tank. So everything we saw in the tank is performance just like we've seen before and looks very good. But you will see this one event if you look through the video. So again, I can't say enough to the teams that really put us here and got the vehicle ready to go fly, got the tank ready to go fly. The vehicle performance was perfectly nominal during ascent. And I caution us all, we have a huge mission in front of us, the PMM activities, the 2 EVAs, all the activity on orbit is not trivial in any way, shape, or form, and we need to stay focused on that, get the orbit activities done, and when we get Discovery back, then we can talk about how things really went. So it's up to the next team to go do that next work, and they're ready to go. But congratulations to the launch team that got us here and did a great job getting us ready to go fly. So, Mike?
Thanks, Bill. So let's see. We talked to you in the pre-launch conference about how proud we were of the teams, like Bill said, that got the external tank ready to go, got our analysis and our understanding of that problem licked. And I think preliminary look today showed that we did have good performance out of the tank. Like Bill said with the foam loss, it looks like that's in family. We're going to go through all the normal rigor, all the photo analysis, all the debris analysis. We'll get imagery back, and we'll make sure we truly do understand all that. And before we fly the next flight, understand that loss is in family and expected. The other work on the GUP to keep the hydrogen vent from leaking when we hit topping flow on the hydrogen tank, again worked perfect. We hit that cycle, and when we hit topping and the valve came open and stayed open for a while, the leak detector stayed flatline, no indications of a leak whatsoever. So a big congratulations to that team who really poured their heart and soul and time into making sure we had that aligned and then realigned and then realigned just right. And so they did a fantastic job. I'll let Mike talk to you about a couple of the little hiccups we had during the count. They were all pretty minor speed bumps in the systems. The ICE team came back and gave us a perfectly clean report on the vehicle. Everything looked great, and so we knew we had a good stack both in the orbiter, the SSMEs, the SRBs, and the external tank. We talked a little bit about weather, just because we always like to talk about the weather, and we kept an eye on the clouds out there. The TAL sites, we had 2 good TAL sites all day long, and we actually ended up getting a good ISS site as well. So we had 3 TAL sites, more than we need. The RTLS weather was never really a problem, but like I said, we did like to talk about it for a little bit, and everything went good. The big excitement came in at the end when we were getting ready to pick up the count, and the range went red. And again, this is just to kind of help you understand the architecture. We have our command and control center here. There's the launch team executing. There's a kind of a launch decision authority, which is that programmatic of are you ready to go that day or not? And that's in the shuttle program. The range has their own equivalent of that, headed by the commander of the 45th Space Wing as the launch decision authority over there in the Range Operations Control Center, the Morale Operations Control Center. And they have their own set of criteria, things that they need, systems they need to have up and running. We've levied some requirements on them that for shuttle launches we need some extra stuff. They've levied some requirements on us for shuttle launches. So we share some commit criteria. But in this case, this was one of theirs, their command systems. They had a hiccup in some of their command systems that they didn't quite understand. I can't really go into all the details again because it's not our requirement. But they basically had a funny that they didn't quite understand, and they did exactly what we would do, which was go red and be no-go until they had a chance to talk about it. They talked it over and decided that the configuration they were seeing was stable and they were happy with it, and so they gave a go to proceed. The problem becomes one of communication when you get down that close. When we hit the T-9 point where we wanted to pick up the count, they still hadn't yet figured out if they were going to be able to resolve this problem, so we decided to count to 5 minutes. Mike's launch team came to me with that recommendation. It was an outstanding one to buy a little more time, keep counting to 5 minutes. We made sure the range was okay with us proceeding down to that point, and we would have held at 5, which we ended up doing because they didn't quite get that problem resolved. And from that point on, we had 3 minutes of hold time to burn. Once we hit that 5 minute window, we pretty much verbally behind the scenes had the nod that we were going to be okay to pick up. We were going to get a green from the range. It just takes a while for some of that communication path to happen. And unfortunately, this was a very visible communications delay. But it's kind of natural, right? Yeah, and you got to be careful and you got to do everything the right way. On the range side, they literally have a switch, the hold fire switch, that they throw to say it is a inhibit to the countdown. It cannot proceed. And we cannot pick up our count until that switch is thrown. I verbally told Mike that we had the verbal approval from the range to go ahead and go. That was not a commitment to say we're going to override the range and launch no matter what they say. That was get the teams moving, get ready to pick up the count, get the clocks all ready to go and the books ready. And then we did get that go to proceed from the SRO, the range safety officer, to say, and the hold fire switch was removed and we had a go to count. We ended up having, there was about 4 seconds on the countdown clock. When you do the math of performance drain back on the vehicle, we had about 2 seconds of hold time remaining, which is about 1 more second than Mike needed to get the job done. So it was plenty of margin. So it all worked out very well, and I would say we scripted it that way, but I could use a little less heart palpitations in the final couple seconds of the countdown. But again, a testament to the processes and the inhibits that are in place, and the reason why we have independent cross-checks and communication paths to be able to work through problems. And we don't just rush to commit. We do wait for the right authorities to check and verify that they are okay. So in this case, we did that. We'll debrief to make sure there's nothing we can do a little better in the future, or any ways that we could communicate a little better what the actual constraints and the clocks are. It's always that lots of too many cooks watching the pot, watching the clock. It's hard. Time flies when you're trying to just make sure you're communicating, and that happened. I looked up, and all of a sudden we were at about 35 seconds to go, and we hadn't yet quite got what we needed, but we got there. So that was an exciting thing. I talked to the teams back in Houston. The crew is on orbit. They're busy reconfiguring the shuttle from the orbiter from the rocket for ascent into the spacecraft for orbit operations. OMS 2 went just fine. They're in a great orbit. We had a nominal MECO with no problems from the main engines. I was joking with our main engine and our SRB compadres. They kind of were not in the limelight for the last 4 months. External tank had kind of stepped up to shade them, and apparently 4 months of dwell time made them work even better, because the main engines were picture perfect right down the middle, and the SRBs did the fantastic job they always do. It is truly amazing. I get the emotional choke up of seeing the vehicle launch and putting humans in space, but from an engineering perspective, it is a technical marvel to see the main engines and the SRBs carry this vehicle into orbit. The amount of energy that we're putting into that thing to get it up into orbit and then head into Mach 25 is a truly outstanding event. And the fact that it happens perfectly every time is also a testament to the teams and the commitment to get us to the pad in the first place. So it was really pleased to see that, and there were lots of smiles in the firing room all around. But again, like Bill said, it's time to focus on the mission. The guys have a really busy flight ahead of them. 2 EVAs delivering hardware to the station, the permanent logistics module as a storage facility for station. And I know now that ATV's there and now that we're on our way, the station program is very anxious to get to work and help posture the station for the future and another 10 or 20 years, hopefully, of science in space. So I'll let Mike give you some more details.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, let's see, it was kind of an exciting last few minutes of this countdown. Several of us have been around for many, many countdowns, and this was one for the record books. The way it works, and Mike did a great job describing it, we could not pick up the count until they undid their hold switch on the range side, and they ultimately did that. And so it took a little bit of time to get the communications from their commander down to the superintendent of range operations that they were indeed go, and to release that the hold switch. That's a physical switch on their console over there. Once that was done, then we were clear to proceed. It takes us a few seconds to get the final go to the NASA test director from myself and pick up the clock. And so, it may have seemed a little bit rushed to some people on the outside, but to me on the inside and to the launch team, we practiced this. We practiced late picking up of the clock routinely. And so, it's a testament to the team that we prepare for things just like this. And I'm very glad today that we have practiced quite a few times, because it really paid off. We were a couple seconds away from losing the window, and then we would have stood down and come back tomorrow and try it again, and that would have been okay too. But we made it today, and the rest of the countdown really was pretty easy. A couple little issues. You probably saw the issue with the tile on the orbiter hatch. No big deal there. We talked about it and recognized the type of repair that was needed. We performed that repair, and that's good to go. We don't have an issue with that at all. So this was Discovery's last. Great way to go out. She gave us a little bit of a fit today, but it's a great way to get Steve, Lindsay, and his crew on orbit. So very, very proud of my launch team and all the rest of the people that work so hard on Discovery and all the support systems around the country. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. We'll now take questions here at Kennedy Space Center. Remember to wait for the microphone, state your full name and affiliation, and please only initially ask one question. We'll try to come back for follow-up. Go ahead.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. Since I only have one question, I guess I'll start with, can I get just a little more detail on what has to happen anytime you have a manual hold like this to pick up the count? I'm kind of under the impression that even if you guys communicate properly and you give the go, Mike Weinbach give the go, you still have to have the GLS operator manually type it in and all that kind of thing to have the count resume. How long does that normally take? And I'll have a follow-up if you come back around.
Yeah, there were two things going on there. Now, remember, the Eastern Range enabled their hold fire switch, and so they have to undo that. Once they put that in the proceed position, that's an instantaneous signal from them over to us via hardwire. And then, since we put in a manual hold at 5 minutes intentionally, because we wanted to go down to 5 and hold there, then we had to instruct the GLS operator, the ground launch sequencer operator, which is really kind of the brains of the countdown, you could say, that to pick up the clock as well. So the inhibit that would physically prevent us from picking up the countdown clock had to be removed first, and then we had to instruct our ground launch sequencer operator to actually pick up the clock. And so that's what you heard Steve Payne, the NASA test director, tell George Thomas, the GLS operator, at the end to pick up the clock on your mark, and he counted down, and we were good to go.
Randy Avera, Interspace News. This is for Gertzmeyer and Moses. The redesign of the stringers on the intertank section of the ET, regarding the material properties, was it lithium aluminum material, or was it just aluminum like the previous tanks prior to the lightweight and super lightweight tanks? I know you added the radius blocks, but the basic stringer, do you know the composition of that material?
Yeah, so the stringers are the aluminum lithium new lightweight tanks. This is one of the super lightweight tanks. The radius block mod was just regular aluminum. It was not aluminum lithium compound.
Yeah, in the front here. Marcia Dunn.
Marcia Dunn, Associate Press from Mike Leinbach. Yesterday you taught us you expected it to be tough seeing Discovery take off this last time. How tough was it for you? And talk a little bit about the emotions that you sensed in the control room after liftoff.
Well, counting down, we were busy doing our jobs, and so the emotion didn't have time to kick in. I'll tell you, there were a lot of people, a lot of pats on the back afterwards, and the closeout crew gave me a surprise. As a matter of fact, that for Discovery's last launch, they gave me this is from the hatch cover, and it's signed by the astronaut crew and signed by the closeout crew. And so that was a gift from them to me, and that's going to take a very special place in my home.
Jim Siegel, Celebration Independent Newspaper. Did you have any sensors or other ways of monitoring the stringers around those radius blocks as this launch happened? And do you know have any idea whether they were successful or unsuccessful? I mean, other than the launch was successful.
Yes, so there was no additional instrumentation. We had all our normal inspection assets focused on that region. When the cryo load went past that and the liquid level in the tank rose and shocked that metal flange, which is when it broke the first time. So just our normal inspection assets to verify that it functioned properly. And then we have our imagery going uphill, and when we get on orbit, the crew turns around and takes pictures of the external tank, and so we'll be able to review those photos and see if there were any kind of foam defects around that flange that might lead us to suspect something with the stringers. But so no dedicated specialized instrumentation.
Randy Siegel, WSTU Radio, for Bill. Bill, now that we're on orbit, this fly around has been bandied around for some time as being quite important and something that we want to do. Can you tell us when we may have a handle on when we're going to do it, if we're going to do it, and why is it that important?
The teams are taking a look at it. They'll evaluate whether we can do it or not, and we'll make a decision, I think, probably around flight day 6 of the mission. So it'll be a ways into the mission before we actually make the decision. We look at it, it's important from a couple standpoints. It's first a good photo documentation of the configuration. It's unique in the fact that we have all the vehicles from all the partners docked at station at one time, which gives us just a nice, kind of public affairs, international view. But then it also gives us some data from an engineering standpoint of how well station's performing. We'll look for micrometeoroid debris damage. We fly around, in this case with the Soyuz, in a different angle than we typically do when we do the shuttle fly around. So we'll see some hardware and some other areas of station which we typically do not see, and we can't see as easily with our assets on board station with the robotic arm and cameras and things. So it'll give us some engineering data in some areas we haven't seen before. Also, as we retire the shuttle from flying, we're going to use the Soyuz for this fly around, so this also gives us a chance to practice a Soyuz fly around like we're going to do in the future. So it's another way to gain some experience in a test configuration to go do that for an activity we're going to do pretty routinely once we get there. So it's a combination of all those things. Right now the Russian partners are taking a look at it. I can't say whether we'll do it or not. We're gonna let them, determine whether they think this is the right thing to do, what the risks are, what the safety aspects are. The team's trained. Are we ready to go do it? And we may or may not do this. So we'll just wait as we get through the mission, let the team decide and work it and see what happens. If we have to do focused inspection or we have EVAs running along, then this is clearly lower priority and it won't occur. So we'll let the mission play out and see if we need to do it or not.
Hi, it's Craig Cavalt with Aerospace America for Gerst. Looking ahead at least a few days here, if there's a federal shutdown, how would that affect toward the end of the flight, ground staffing and so forth? And taking that a little broader, how would that affect STS-134 processing?
Yeah, again, we'll kind of see what happens. We haven't really done any in detailed contingency planning yet. For the mission that's flying, we'd probably consider most of the folks mission critical personnel, and that's pretty much transparent to us. And then we would go ahead and see where it fits in the overall manifest. We'd work it with the right folks. But we'll see what happens on the congressional side. It's up to them to go work to budget things. But I think from a top-level standpoint, we'll be able to just press on and continue kind of the way we're heading, and we'll see what happens and what goes forward as we move forward.
Scott Powers from Orlando Sentinel, I guess one of the mics. Can we get some more information about the range hold and what that may or may not have been indicating?
Let's see. Again, it's their system and it's their internal hardware, so the details of what happened, we need to talk to them for, or I should say you guys need to talk to them. And but from a what was conveyed to me from a purpose of the thing, it was their command system, so it's the system they use to command the things they need for telemetry and range safety systems. And there was a hiccup in that system that they did not quite understand, and they needed time to evaluate.
Over here. Right. The question's over there. Second row.
Chris Gebhardt with NASASpaceflight.com. First off, just a huge congratulations to you and all the teams. A tremendous effort from everyone. For a lot of us wondering, for the end of the window, the publicized end of the window earlier was 4:55 p.m. and I'm just curious as to why the window was closing at 4:53 today.
Yeah, that's we do a real-time day of launch. We call it a dolly-loo, a day of launch iLoad update, where we assess actual winds, actual temperatures, actual propellant loads in the ET. So the pre-flight plan was assuming for the predicted temperatures, wind profile, and expected loading in the tank, you'd have a performance to have about a 5-minute window. We knew we'd be pretty tight on that, and we didn't have very much ascent performance margin above that, and that we could expect the window to shrink. It was the same situation we were back in November, where I think we only had a 3-minute window on that first count we did on November 5th. And so when we got their day of launch today, they ran the numbers. The ascent performance margin was up a little bit, but not quite enough to give us the full 5-minute window, so we had a 3-minute window for the day today.
Bill Horowitz, CBS News. For Mike Moses, I guess, or maybe Bill, I'm not sure. Two foam-related questions. You mentioned cryo pumping, so could you tell where the stuff came from? I couldn't tell whether it was from above or below, number one. And number two, does the amount that you saw during this ascent, obviously it was outside of your window of vulnerability, but the amount was a little higher than usual. Will that play any role in your decision to go ahead and stack 134 and go out to the pad, or is that something you guys are going to want to talk about?
Again, we'll take a look at the data and see what it means to us. By cryo pumping, what we know is by the release time. What happens is the air essentially gets behind the foam and liquefies, and then when the propellant level drops in the hydrogen tank, eventually then it warms up enough where that liquid air then warms up to the flash point and boils and then forces and pops off the foam. So this looks to us to be pretty consistent with that, with the timing we saw in the location. And the location is right around the hydrogen flange. And if you remember, we talked to you about we were concerned in that region. We didn't want to do a lot of repairs in that region because we thought we could create a path where air could then get into that super cold region of the tank and do exactly what we potentially saw here. So this is a kind of a known phenomena for us. We'll go take the time, we'll analyze, we'll make sure that this is really the same phenomena we saw, but that's our indication today. And then we'll see if it's right, and then we'll determine if it means we need to do something different in this region. But from the cursory look at what we saw today and what we saw in the ascent video, I think it's consistent with our experience base. The loss, although the size is fairly large, the mass is not very much of a concern to us from a mass standpoint, and the fact that it's late and it's kind of an understood timing consideration doesn't cause us a lot of concern, but that doesn't mean we won't still keep digging and looking and trying to understand over the next couple of weeks. But it's not inconsistent with what we've seen and what we would have expected before. And Mike, would you add anything?
Yeah, so from a whole effect to the next mission, we always kind of have that. We want to make sure we understand the in-flight anomalies, and so right now I think we're rolling over on the 28th. We'll let the team see what they chew through by then, and we'll decide if we really do want to give them a little more time before we roll over or not. So that's kind of always the real-time call that we make every time we fly.
Irene?
Thanks. Irene Klotz with Reuters for either Mike Moses or Mike Lineback. When the range called out this problem, they pretty much sounded like they were done. And Mike, you kind of told your team to calm down and take it a step at a time. And it sounded like something actually shut down. And now, in talking to us, you described it as a hiccup. Can you clarify at all exactly what happened and why the range seemed to be like, okay, we're done, and you all were like, no, not quite?
Well, the call that came to Mike's team and the NTDs from the superintendent's range operations was that the range was no go, and so that was their way of saying we just had a hiccup. The same thing would happen if we'd have been sitting there and a cloud would have blown in. All of a sudden, range weather or launch weather out in Houston would have suddenly come in and been no go. It doesn't mean that you're done for the day and you're never going to start the count again. It means I currently have a condition I cannot proceed under. And so the range had a hiccup in their system that they needed time to talk about. They weren't go to proceed before they understood it, so they threw their hold switch and said, we're no go right now, because we were very close to picking up the count at that time frame. And it's more important to make sure we've over-communicated we are not going to proceed until we understand the problem. So they threw their hold fire switch and said they're no go for operations while they proceeded to talk about the problem to see if they could resolve it. We do it all the time internally on our side. We do it both ways, right? You allow if this is a problem like this hatch tile problem, right? We could have suddenly stopped counting while we had the guys fix the tile, but we knew we were going to be able to fix that, so we proceeded on. This was one that we were too close to be able to proceed. We could buy a little more time by counting down to 5 minutes, but not much time to talk. So it wasn't ever that they had a problem they were no-go for and then all of a sudden they fixed it. It was that they had an ongoing problem they were trying to resolve, and in the meantime they were alerting us that they were no-go until they could fix that problem. It happens fairly often, actually.
Yeah.
It just doesn't usually happen within a minute of launch.
And from the launch, I'm glad it doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah, I couldn't handle that one.
You know, from a launch team perspective, the natural reaction when everybody's ready to go and you hear that one system is no-go, there's a natural, and that happened, and I wanted to make sure that it got the team back into the game, and we were technically no-go at that point, but we had window remaining, and so we're going to talk about problems until we run out of time, and so that was the first time when I said something to the team, to kind of get back into the game. And then when we picked up the clock at 5 minutes, then there was the other natural reaction that, yeah, all right, we're ready to go. And so I calmed the team back down at that time too, because then we were at 5 minutes and counting, and that's when the systems really start getting active on the shuttle and the boosters, and so we needed to get back into the game, and trust me, they calmed down and concentrated very, very quickly.
Yeah, Mike and his team did an amazing job. That's exactly why we train. The mantra is under stress, you fall back to the level of training you had, and that's exactly what happened today. Everybody fell back to the training, which told them to just stick to their guns and wait for the problem. In the firing room, I have a phone. Mike does too. That's a direct line to the 45th Wing Commander, and the purpose of that is their systems no go. We can then find out, is this one we're going to fix or not, and should we proceed or not? And that's what happened today. We got the behind the scenes communication that we're not sure. Don't stop. This is not a scrub condition just yet. We're not sure. And so we decided to press on, and then they eventually did clear their problem.
Todd Halverson of Florida today. I may have missed this, but just to clarify, did the foam liberation that you saw come from areas of the tank that had been patched up, repaired, or modified? And secondly, could you remind me of the bracketing for the aerodynamically sensitive period? I think it's up to like 135 seconds, but could you refresh me on that?
Yeah, the foam came off from an area that we did not work on or repair. It was in the inner tank region somewhere, either in the inner tank or on the hydrogen tank side, right in that interface. And it was between the two big struts that come up and attach to the orbiter. The foam loss was at 351, and I think our ASTT is around the time that you said, around 135 seconds. So it was well after that point, and you can actually see it move forward. It impacts the strut, and then it doesn't come apart even when it hits the strut. So this is pretty thin foam, and that's evidence that when it hits the strut that it didn't break into pieces, that its velocity was very small. So then that's evidence that there was no air to really push it or accelerate it to cause potential damage to us.
Over here.
Hi, Eben Brown, Fox News Radio. Because of the extra little hold in there while the range issue was being worked on, what type of, if any, course correction or any type of engine burn or something once they're in orbit and on their way to the station to make sure they actually get to station at the right time frame? Does this change anything of how that works, or no?
Yeah, so the rendezvous profile that's built, it has the flexibility to accommodate the entire launch window. So none of the burns will move. I think the OMS 2, which is the first orbit insertion burn we do, I think that ignition time moved a couple seconds. I don't know that the magnitude changed at all, but basically the rendezvous profile is built to have the ability to adjust to make up for either changes in the station's orbit or in the shuttle's orbit. If there's a collision avoidance burn that has to be done, all that stuff, we give ourselves built-in flexibility to be able to accommodate within a given plan for the rendezvous. So the technical answer is yes, it did affect us. The operational answer is no, it didn't have any impact to us.
Nancy Atkinson from universetoday.com. Could you describe the black slurry that was put on where the tile came off? It was described as a black slurry, but what kind of material is that?
Yeah, first there are many different types of repair techniques to tiles. You heard us talking about, was it top coat damage? Was it an old repair? Turned out it was a shaved tile that had this black slurry put on the top of it. It's kind of a thick. It's like a black paint, but very, very viscous. And you just kind of dab it on, smooth it out a little bit, and you're good to go. And really, that's just to protect the underlying silica substrate from any kind of exposure at all. It's a very, very standard repair. You see them all over the vehicle. No big deal.
There's another question over here.
Randy Avera with Interspace News for Gertzmeyer. Have there been any proposals from the commercial space industry to develop plans or to operate the Eastern Missile Test Range for commercial flights out of Kennedy Space Center, the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in general for the future?
I'm not aware of any, but I don't know. It's probably the easiest answer. I wouldn't be informed of them directly if there were some, but I don't know of any. So I think the answer is really we'd have to get you a more detailed answer, but I don't know of any. And you know that some are already flying, right? SpaceX already flies off a launch pad 40, et cetera, right? And Orbital is planning to go out of Wallops in the future, but then beyond that, I don't have any knowledge.
Hi, gentlemen. Phil Keating, Fox News. So we have the entire day of fantastic weather, no technical issues at all that NASA's following all day, and then 15 minutes before the window opens, you've got what's described as this computer glitch. The implication was that all of the humans involved here know it's just a computer glitch, that it's not reflecting a serious, real concern. So could there have been a point where, even though the range is saying red no go, that they could have been overruled and the launch commences?
That's an easy one to answer. That's no.
Absolutely
They
not.
are the launch decision authority for range safety. We are the launch decision authority for our vehicle. And if they are no-go to launch for range safety, we will not launch that day. And just like I was trying to make clear at the beginning, the process of hearing me on the loop telling Mike the range has given me a go, pick up the count, that doesn't mean proceed without them. That is get our team ready to go, so when the switch is thrown, we're not delaying any further than we have to. And we're still waiting for their go to proceed. And that's exactly what we did today.
Okay, in the back, as soon as the mic gets to you.
Sure. Mark Timpson for WMFE Public Radio. Just wondering, since there was more foam than normal coming down from the shuttle when it reached that point in its liftoff, how does that impact the inspections that you'll do when the shuttle flips over and you take pictures? Will you be focusing in a more detailed way because of that extra foam at all?
I think the answer would be no. We have the standard plan that we'll go do the standard inspection. We'll also get a good chance when we get the umbilical well cameras down. We'll actually be able to get some good pictures of the tank. The lighting was excellent, obviously, on orbit, so we'll get a good chance to see exactly where we had foam loss from the tank. There may be more than what I saw in the ascent video. We get surprised when we actually see some areas. But then the standard inspection is pretty much our routine inspection. There's nothing that would cause us to do anything different than we are. We have a very thorough, very methodical plan to go take a look at the bottom of the orbit, and we'll just continue with that same plan.
Okay. Any additional questions?
James Dean from Florida Today. Just wondered how unusual it is to actually launch later in a window than planned. And for Mike Leinbach, unless I missed it, I don't think you got to deliver your usual send-off to the shuttle commander. If you'd like to deliver it now, I'd be curious. Yeah.
And it was going to be so good, too. I'll save it for the next commander. We've launched late before. There was another mission I recall we launched with 11 seconds left in the window. But you know, we have launch windows on purpose. We train for them. It probably makes it feel even better when we launch late in a window because you're working hard and you know, you've accomplished something really great, and the fact that you've done it with just a few seconds left to go, I don't know, it probably makes it a little bit more sweet.
Yeah, and to fall back on what Mike said, you know, we've practiced so much. When you first asked your question, my response was, I can't remember ever launching on time, but that's because we sim all the time going late in that window because we're working issues. So it's almost second nature to us to not be so worried about the end of the window like that.
Hi, Mark Kirkman with Interspace News again. I'd like to stop talking about hold fires for a second. And to me, this is a big deal that Discovery's never going to leave the pad again. I was just wondering if the three of you could tell me where you were the first time Discovery did. Some of you were working with the program. Some of you may be too young to have been with the program. But was it on your radar at all? What's your recollections the first time Discovery flew compared to today?
I was in Console in Houston, Texas, as a propulsion officer on Discovery's first flight.
And I was in college dreaming of being like Bill.
And my wife and I were down here on a house hunting trip. I had just gotten the notification that NASA was going to hire me. We came down on a trip, and we got the first launch I ever saw was a Discovery launch. And so, yeah, it brings back good memories.
Stefano Coledan for Middle East News 24 for Mike Langberg. This is going to sound kind of a funny question, but do you have a speed dial on your phone when you talk to the commander of the 45th Space Wing?
That's really not that bad a question, Stefano. We have point-to-point phones, and they are hard lines, and when you pick up the handset, it automatically rings on the other person's console. Mike and I have one. As he said, we both have one to the commander, and it's for that very purpose. I mean, it's to get as quick as communication as you can, and we use them every now and then. Mike and I, we use ours quite a bit, and probably in every countdown, just to talk about different things. So yeah, no, instant communication is a good thing.
Additional questions or follow-up?
Jim Siegel, Celebration Independent Newspaper. Again, I wondered if Mike Leinbach could hold up that banner again so some of us who weren't quick on the trigger could get a photo of it.
Now?
Yes, well, whenever. You can wait till later.
Thank you. I was quick. Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. I'm wondering if any of you have communicated with Tim Copra, and do you know where he might have been for the liftoff?
I have not communicated with him. I think he's in Houston when I ask, and he's going to participate in the EVAs, so you'll see him on console helping out with the EVAs to make sure things go well. But I have not talked to him directly, but I'm pretty sure he was in Houston for the launch.
James Dean from Florida Today. All the reports we were hearing were that there were just massive crowds out there, and I'm just wondering if you're surprised that we're seeing this huge show of people and an interest and emotion for launches now.
Yeah, not surprised. It's funny, everybody calls and asks me for advice on when to leave to get here and what the best road to go is. We're all here for launch 16 hours before launch. We have no idea what's going on outside this center. And we don't leave until after you guys stop asking us questions. So hopefully we miss a fair bit of the traffic on the way home. But no, it's natural that the final flight ought to deserve that type of attention from the public, and it certainly is within the NASA family. We've, as Mike talked about in one of the pre-launch conferences, there's a whole team set up to kind of look after the morale of the workforce, what we can do not only to help us make it through this time at the end of the program, but to commemorate the work and the dedication and the lifetime energy that these folks have put into this program. And so we have extra car passes for families. We had arrangements that were able to bring folks that normally need an escort but their spouse works the console and they can't do that. We had ways to get them on site this time. And so we really took some extra steps, and it's deservedly so, to allow folks to share the experience of seeing Discovery go for the last time.
Chris Gebhardt with NASASpaceflight.com again. I got to ask a technical question. The minor bus issue that you worked earlier in the count, can you just give us a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, it had to do with our actually it's our range safety system. We had a little bit of a spike on one of the ground buses, and it was a 6 amp spike. It took out our ground IRD, our integrated receiver decoder, which is a piece of equipment we use to test out the range safety system. So a piece of ground support equipment failed. That caused a spike in the bus. That's not a requirement for launch. That's a ground checkout requirement. So all the tests that we did after that failure it checked out perfectly fine. I mean, the range safety system from our side was never an issue at all.
Any more questions? James?
Sorry, one more. Bill Gerstenmaier, you discussed this a little bit before, but until now there was no guarantee that shuttle would make it up there to join all these other vehicles at once, and so you could keep talking about this fly around and stuff. So just wondered, again, after your emails from the ESA folks and all that, just your feelings on, well, I guess, what you think you'll feel when you see shuttle docking and joining all those vehicles up there.
You know, I think it's a pretty unique time in the history of spaceflight. If you look at what we're doing with space station, right? You know, the HTV launch first. There was a Progress undocking and launch in there. Then there's the ATV launch, and then the shuttle launch. So this is a pretty amazing time on board space station. The crew is tremendously busy getting activities done and getting the station really outfitted for the kind of the final time with the final things, and adding this new module is a big deal. So I don't know. I think we just need to step back and reflect on these times, because this is a very, very intriguing time in terms of the number of vehicles going to space station and the activities that are occurring on station. This is probably unprecedented in the history of human spaceflight, the amount of activity to one single destination, all focused around the same thing, and all the partners around the world that are working together in these activities. So the tie between us is much stronger than I've ever seen it before. I get congratulations from Japan and ESA at all hours of the day and night, because you know it's many hours different from there, and they're staying up watching launches from Japan and ESA, and I'm getting texts from them just like it's daytime. So they are following our activities with the same the same enthusiasm that we are here, and what a neat thing to see this entire international team pulling together to go do this activity. So I think spend a little time even during the mission to watch the EVAs, watch the interactions between the Canadians that are working the robotics, watch what's happening with ATV at the same time. We're going to do a little reboost with it here in a couple days, actually probably prior to docking of the shuttle. So this is a really neat time for you to step back and watch and see how this international ballet and dance comes together in space, and it's pretty special if you spend a little time to look and see how it all fits together.
Mark Fowler from the Arizona Republic. Following up the question a minute ago about the crowds and the enthusiasm and the surge of interest, and I may be jumping a gun just a little bit, but have you given any thought, I know it's a little premature, to what is likely to be an awful lot of attention on 134 with Mark Kelly and his wife, and what the ramifications that might be?
Well, you know, from a planning standpoint, we'll go through the normal process to see what type of attendees we're going to have and launch guests. But no, we haven't done anything extra special. We'd go through the normal rigor from a safety and security evaluation. You know, the number of people we allow on site is limited by our range safety rules that allow for public safety. Then the crowds outside that fence are just kind of what's to be expected. But no, I don't think we put a lot of serious thought into that one. We're still a little bit away from that in a planning process standpoint.
Randy Avera, InnoSpace News. All the investments that have been put forth by taxpayers and other investors to build the International Space Station, once we get it completed in its most mature configuration, what is the mechanism by which the taxpayer will understand what they got for their investment? We've had spinoffs and outreaches by NASA for decades, but we still have a societal problem where people don't seem to understand the tremendous return on their investment in space hardware and space operations. Is there some new vision for relating the science that's coming off of this International Space Station?
We're trying to work with the science community to try to get that information out to you in a better format. And you'll see some information we're going to be providing to you that I think you can use and understand. The problem is some of our researchers don't want to really share that information until they've really confirmed that the findings they're finding are really 100% peer-reviewed and analyzed and all those things. But we're trying to put together a series of products where you can look at just some of the numbers of the amount of investigations that are going on space station. They've dramatically increased the number of hours that we're doing research on board station. We're looking at unique things like combustion and zero gravity, which is some pretty unique experiments that are occurring that are going up. We've been working with vaccine potential development for salmonella, et cetera. There's even some on this shuttle flight that went up for that. We're doing lots of robotic activities. So we're going to put together some publications and some things which we think will be helpful for you to use, that you can help us get the message out of what's going on with Station. But I think our public affairs folks would be glad to hear from you. If there's a better way we can communicate with you, you could get with our public affairs folks, and maybe we can generate some products that are easier for you to use and distribute out to the population in general.
That would be an international collaboration.
And it's an international product that we're trying to put together.
Yes, my name is Chuck Lauer. It's a WOW satellite television from Japan. In the military, when a unit stands down, there is a retirement of the colors ceremony typically. Do you have anything special planned for Discovery when she comes back and goes to wheel stop?
Yeah, I mean, we have some ideas. There's nothing concrete. Again, we've talked about this before, that really the job has been focused on getting it in orbit, getting the mission done successful. Once we hit wheel stop, then we'll start talking about a commemoration. But for us, the program still continues, even though from a team perspective, we do want to recognize the commitment of the team and the effort spent, here at Kennedy, especially by people who've dedicated their particular career to that vehicle. But as a program in general, the shuttle program still has a couple more months and 2 more flights that we need to make sure we stay focused on and stay targeted on. So we've talked about some interim type things that we'll do, but we're probably saving the celebration type stuff until wheel stop of the last mission.
And I would just tell you too that after wheel stop of any mission, the orbiter is still hot. There's still hazards on board, different fuels and commodities and pyrotechnics, that type of thing. So any type of widespread celebration here at the Kennedy Space Center would follow all that safing, and that takes a good 3-4 weeks, something like that, typically, to get all that done. And so, we would wait for all that to be done before we'd open it up to masses to go do something with the orbiter, if that's indeed in the plan. I'm not quite sure.
We've done some things for employees and families. As we do the rollover to the VAB, we stop for some pictures for some of the employees that have dedicated their lives working on these vehicles. When we roll out to the pad now, we let the employees come down for the rollout to the pad, which is also a chance for them to reflect a little bit on what they've dedicated their careers to and dedicate a large portion of their life. As far as the end of mission things, we'll think of all that later a little bit. We're still pretty focused on making sure we utilize this asset in the best way we can and stay focused on the mission we've got in front of us, and then we'll talk more about what we think the appropriate thing is to do at the end.
Any additional questions here? All right, we'll take one more and then we'll wrap. James Dean.
James Dean from Florida Today for Mike Leinbach. I gathered from the commentary that there was, among the closeout crew and maybe the 15 various positions that we get to see on TV, there were some folks who were working their last mission. I was wondering if that was true of any folks on your consoles in the firing room, if there's anything special done for them, or just about, just how many folks were kind of working their last mission, do you think, or is this the team that's going to take you all the way to the end?
Well, there were a couple people in the firing room whose day was their last day on the last mission today. Those are voluntary folks. George Thomas, I mentioned one. He's the ground launch sequencer operator. He took a voluntary layoff. Today was his last launch. Our safety console operator, Dwayne Thompson, this was his last launch. He took a voluntary layoff. So yeah, there were a couple people there who chose to leave after this launch. But as I described before, we have a very rigorous process in place where we look at all critical skills across the Space Center and determine whether we're go or no go based on the head count and the experience level of those people. And so right now we're perfectly fine for the next 2 missions, and I don't expect that to change. We'll be good. We'll be good till the end.
Okay, that concludes today's news conference. For more information on Space Shuttle Discovery's STS-133 mission, please visit us on the web at www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.